Hello, and good evening, guys. Welcome to today's class. We tried to have a class yesterday, but I guess our schedules were kind of clashing. So I'm going to do this class, record this class, so that I'll make it available for you guys. So we are continuing with JavaScript string methods. If you remember in the last class, we actually treated some more string methods, and we've treated some properties as well. The first property we treated was a JavaScript length property that returns the number of characters in a string. Then we went on to look at methods like the arc method that basically takes an index number of a character in a string and returns that character. And then we looked at methods like char add, char code add, and a number of other methods. Then we went on to treat also some peculiar group of methods that actually help us to extract substrings from larger bodies of strings. All right, so and that was slice, substring, and substr. And if you missed that class, I will recommend that you check the link below to actually get the video for that class. So today we're going to continue to look at some more methods. Now we're not going to exhaust all the methods because obviously there are so many methods in string methods in JavaScript. What I would advise to do is for this method, like you can see some of them here, quite a number of them here. So there's slice, substring, then there's the index array-like, array-like a way of accessing string characters, and you see many of them here. All right, so we're going to look at a number of them today as well. All right, we're going to look at a number of them. We'll start with a particular method called the concat method. Before that, there are two very simple methods from their names. I call them simple because from their names it's easy to tell what they do. There's methods that allow us to change the case of our strings. All right, so if it's on lowercase, the method allows us to change it to uppercase, and if it's on uppercase, it allows us to change it to lowercase. All right. So we can see the two methods here, very straightforward. So something I want to mention again and repeat and emphasize is the fact that in JavaScript, most of the inbuilt functions and methods, it's easy to tell what they do from the way the functions and methods are named. All right. So it's a convention for you to also make a habit of, even if you're creating your own custom functions and methods, always make sure that you use names that are descriptive of what that function or method does. All right, so remember that we've discussed what methods are and what properties are, and we said methods are like the superpower, action power, and then we said the property fixed features of objects. All right. So let's quickly go to W3 School's code editor. All right, so we have our boilerplate here. So basically, let's take a look at this boilerplate. What do we have here? All right, so here we have like basically an H1, which is represented in the mini browser by this string here, by this JavaScript bold here. Then underneath that, we have a simple paragraph that says convert strings to uppercase. And then we have a button element. Now this button element has an attribute called the onClick attribute, and the value of this onClick attribute is a string that actually calls a function. The name of the function is my function. Remember again that JavaScript uses a convention for creating names of functions and code pieces, right? So it uses a particular convention, and the name of that convention is camel casing. So you will find that both for inbuilt JavaScript and most people who use JavaScript, they tend to use camel casing in creating names of variables, creating names of functions, creating names of other things, objects, and all of that. And to remind you, camel casing is a convention of naming whereby if you have a name of a variable or function or method or whatever it is, and that name is made up of more than one word, so it's a should I say combination of words, all right? So it's a composite word made up of more than one word. You make sure that the first word in the name is all lowercase, but after that, every word after that has the first character of the word capitalized. So if you look at the name of this function, it's obeying the camel casing um, um, rule, the camel casing convention. So you see that it's a composite word. It has my, which can stand as a word on its own, and then function, which obviously also can stand as a word on its own. And if you look carefully, the first word, which is my, is all lowercase, and the first alphabet in the second word, it has its the letter F, which is capitalized. So have that at the back of your mind. It's a good practice. Of course, it's not set in stone. So of course you can create your own functions ignoring that convention. But it makes good JavaScript coding, and it makes you compliant when you adhere to conventions like that. If you go for JavaScript conferences or maybe coding interviews, if you meet somebody who is a stickler for things like that, it will be to your advantage for you to have a habit of sticking to that convention. So let's move on. After that, we have a paragraph as well that has some text in it. And this text is what we refer to as inner HTML, or sometimes inner text. All right? So it can be referred to as inner HTML or inner text. There's a difference between the two, but we're going to be looking at that difference, as we go along. So this paragraph has an ID of demo, as you can see, and inside of it, it holds just two words, hello world. Now, the script is where the action is actually taking place. Yeah. And in this script, we have a function, just one function, that's all. Now, I'm going to indent this a bit so it's a bit more readable. Now, if you look at this function, let's see what the function is doing. Within this function, the very first statement is a declaration and definition of a variable text. All right? So we talked about what definition is and declaration. So this text is a variable. And what this text is doing, this text is actually holding a value. And where is that value coming from? There's a document object. And remember I told you that in the document object belongs to the browser, and it's part of a DOM. It's actually the root, the root object in a DOM. The document is the root object in a DOM. And what is a DOM? The DOM is a document object model of a browser. It's how the browser programmatically represents or stores the HTML structure of your file. All right, so the DOM is how the browser programmatically stores the HTML structure of your file. So, and at the root of that file, the root of that structure is the document. So the document basically is an object. And because it's an object, we can expect that it will have what? You guessed right, properties and methods. So it's calling a specific kind of method, which is called the getElementsById method. All right? The getElementsById method. And if you look closely at this method, the method is also obeying the camel case convention or camel case rule. All right? The element it's getting has an ID of demo, so obviously it's this paragraph. And then on that, it's calling a property. So it first called a method of the document object, and then called a property on the result that the method gives us. So this portion of this code, what it does is it collects the paragraph element and stores it. It collects the paragraph element. So if we were to stop this code here, if we were to stop this code here, If we were to stop this code here, what it's doing essentially is it's collecting the whole paragraph element, everything about the element, and storing it. All right? That's what it's doing. But we are not interested in the whole HTML of the paragraph. We're only interested in the hello world portion. To get the hello world portion, we need to call the inner HTML part. We need to call the inner HTML property. That's what gives us the inner part. All right, so that gives us the hello world part. So the hello world is what is being stored in the text. So let's move to the next statement. So this is broken here because of this browser, all right? Because of the browser, so there's not enough space, but we can definitely move that back. All right, so it still works. So this is more readable. So what happens next is this very paragraph element is called here, all right? It's called here. And the inner HTML value, or property rather, the inner HTML property of it is actually called. And what is happening here, this is an assignment statement. It's an assignment statement because we are assigning a new value to the inner HTML property of that same paragraph. And what's the new value? This new value is created by calling the to uppercase method on the text that we already had. All right, on the text that we already had. So what happens is this to uppercase is going to convert whatever is stored in text to uppercase. All right, so we're going to try it right now. And this whole function, my function, is called anytime this button is clicked. So I'm going to click this button and voila, you see that the hello world that was lowercase, or let's say sentence case or title case, has been converted to all uppercase. All right. So if we go ahead, for instance now, and for some reason we decide to change all of this to caps, to capital case or uppercase, we can now try the lower to lower method. All right, to lower case method. And if we run this time, we run it this time, and if we try this, it will return it back to all lower case. So make a note of that. All right. So that's what those two methods, to upper and to lower, and you will find them very handy while building even advanced and complex projects in JavaScript. So the next method is a concat method. And what a concat method basically does is it joins strings. All right. So it joins strings. And because it's a string method, always make sure that you are calling it on a string. So let's take a quick look at this. All right, let's take a quick look at what's happening here. So in this snippet, or in this boilerplate of HTML boilerplate that we have here, we have an H1 and H2, of course. Then we have two paragraphs. And the second paragraph is where all the action is taking place. So as usual, I'm going to do some text indent to ensure that we have some better readability. So two strings have been created and stored in two variables, text1, text2. And in the third variable, some manipulation is taking place, something dynamic, a bit dynamic is taking place. So this first variable, text1, we are calling the concat method on it. And the concat method takes two parameters, takes two arguments actually. You remember we talked about parameters and arguments. We say parameters are for method or function definition. But when you are calling or invoking the functions or the methods, what you pass to them are arguments that represent the parameters. All right. So the parameters are like the variables and the arguments are like the actual values. So make a note of that as well. So this concat method takes two arguments. The first is called a separator. All right. So in this case, it's a space, empty space. All right. While the second is the string that you want to concatenate with your initial string. So in this case, we're having hello world as the first string and world as the second string. And by the time you call that document and the inner HTML value of it, and you pass text3 to it, it joins hello world, hello to world. Now remember that this is a separator. So for instance, because it's a separator, we have this, some space in between that. If we take out the separator, we take out the space by making it an empty string, and we run this, you see that there's no longer any space because it's an empty string. What if we wanted to separate with a comma? All we need to do is put a comma there as a separator, and when we run it, we have a comma. And if we want a dash, we'll do the same thing and we have a dash. So that's something that could also be very useful. So that's basically what a concat method does. Of course, you can do concatenation with plus sign. I find that more useful if I'm trying to join strings that I know. So if there are string values that you are hard coding this way, I believe that the plus operator is more readable and neater than using the concat method. But there are use cases for the concat method where you are actually getting the values, the string values dynamically or maybe from somewhere. All right, so there are different use cases. You can find, good use cases for the two. Now, all string methods return a new string. They don't modify the original string. Strings are immutable. Strings cannot be changed, only replaced. All right, so now let's go to another very important method, string method, which is called the trim method. And what does the trim method do? The trim method basically removes every empty space, all spaces before and after a string. So let's look at this carefully now. Yep. Give me a moment. Let me take some water. Feel a lot better. Okay. So now we have this boilerplate code. And remember, the JavaScript is always in between the opening and closing tag of a script. That's where your JavaScript world lives. Everything outside that is in the HTML world. All right. So, but in JavaScript world, they are always, all right, always out that way. All right. That's JavaScript world. So in between the script tags, you have your JavaScript code. So basically, we have our HTML above. So what we need to look out for is the empty paragraph tag that has an ID of demo. All right. Of course, this demo is not. It's not that you have to be demo. It could be anything. You could put your name there. So it's just an ID. It can be any value. All right. So you could change it. All right. For example, let me go ahead and do that. So let me change it to sumo. You know, sumo wrestlers are Japanese wrestlers. So I'm changing this to sumo, and it still does the same thing. Nothing changes. All right. So it depends on you. You could change. You can use any name for your ID, but it's always good to use names that make sense. Names that help you to have a good idea of what you are doing. And always remember, when you write code in such a way that even if someone else has to read that code, they don't need to go through a heck of trouble to understand what you're writing. All right. Good. So we have this string in text 1 that has empty spaces, then hello world, then some empty space. And in the next variable, text 2, we're calling the trim method to help us trim those empty spaces. So if you look at what we have here in the document.getElement by ID sumo inner HTML, what's happening basically is this is a string. This is hard-coded string. All right? This is hard-coded string. So its length, it can be anything, doesn't matter. But the most important thing is that this string is concatenated using the plus operator to text.length. And remember the length property, we talked about it in previous class, that it returns the number of characters in a string. So text1.length will return the total number of characters in text1. And then we are concatenating that number of characters to another string again. So this is just a string. Remember, this is HTML, and that's the break tag. I'll show you something in a bit. So we are concatenating the second string to another JavaScript length method being called on another variable text2. So remember, this text2.length is going to return the number of characters in the variable text2. And if you see the result on your right in the browser, Length text 1 returns 22 characters because actually we have 22 characters in this string. Spaces are also counted as characters in JavaScript. Okay, all right, so hold on a bit. I need to pause for a bit. My camera just went out. Just hold on a bit. Hold on a bit. Camera just went out. Okay, so we are back. All right. So, okay, my power source just came back, so I might need to do some adjustments again. Just hold on. All right, so that is that. So I promised I was going to say something about the break tag here. So the break tag here added, even though it's added in the string, is actually being rendered as HTML by the time the browser sees it. So the browser will definitely convert everything that is here and convert it to inner HTML. All right, so it's going to read everything as HTML. So this break tag here breaks the line at this point. All right, so if I were to take that break tag out of there and run it, you see that everything appears on one straight line. So it's not very good to see. But as soon as I put back that break tag and I run it, this is a bit more readable. So basically that's what the trim method does. All right, so it trims the space. You can see obviously here that the length of text1 variable is 22 characters and the length of text2 variable is 12 characters. Why? Because the trim method trimmed the empty space in front and at the back of the string. And this trim method is very useful, particularly when you're dealing with forms and you have a public facing form in a browser where users input things, for example a login registration form. You can't really control a user probably making a mistake and hitting tab, therefore adding space. Maybe they're trying to enter their name, or they're trying to enter their phone numbers or their email. So by the time that that form is submitted, what is coming is not just the data that you require, but some text, some space might also be coming. So trim helps you to ensure that regardless of what the person feels, you are able to ensure that you get. So it's a very useful method. Let's move on. All right, let's move on and look at some more methods. Now there's a similar method, it's string start. And from the name of the method, remember I told you about names, all right? Names for, especially for, let's say the inbuilt functions or methods. From the trim start, what do you think is happening here? Yeah, you guessed right. It's trimming only the space in front of the string, all right? So the trim start trims only the space in front of the string. It doesn't trim the ones at the back. You can try this out on your own and you see. Then, of course, there's a sister method that does the exact opposite, trims the space at the back of a string and leaves the space in front. All right, so let's move on. Now, there are other groups of methods like the padding methods. So these padding methods actually help you to pad some string characters. So I'm going to be going to VS Code to illustrate this. So let me create some comments about this. I'm going to use a multi-line comment style to do this, all right, so that it allows me to write multiple lines. So we're talking about string methods, right? String methods for JavaScript, and particularly we're dealing with the pad start method. String method pad start. So I'm going to call it pad start. All right, so I'm going to keep it this way, and because it's a method, I'm just going to put those parentheses. Now, what does it do? All right, so basically this method allows you to add, or repeatedly, let me say, allows you to repeatedly how do you spell repeat? That's E and A, repeatedly add character to the front, not front, of a string. All right. So that's what it does. It allows you to repeatedly add a character to the front of your string. So I'm going to illustrate. All right. I'm going to illustrate. So, but before that, let me say one more thing about this. It takes two arguments. All right. The first, I'm going to write first like this. The first is the length of the new string, and the second, right, let me maintain consistency. Second is the padding character. So you get this better when I demonstrate it in a bit. Character, exactly. I'll demonstrate in a bit. All right, so let's demonstrate. So I'm going to create a variable. I'll use the let keyword. Create a variable. I'll call it str today. And it's going to hold a string character, which you'll see 7, but it's not a number, even though it's 7. It's a string, all right, but character 7. Now, I'm going to create another variable for the new string that it will create, and this will be new str. Remember our camel casing today, and it will hold. It will take the str, which is the first character, the first variable, which is a string. Then we're going to call pad start on it. And remember, pad start is going to, so look at this. Once you hover on this method, see there's a description. You know, with VS Code, you can have certain extensions that help you to get descriptions of what methods and strings can do. So if you look at this carefully, what it's saying that the first character is a max length. So that's the maximum length of the new string that will be created. And that value should be a number. It should be of type number. All right. Then the second one is the fill string, which I call the padding character. The fill string. So it doesn't have to be one single character. It can be a group of characters. So it's called the fill string. And that one has to be a string. And ultimately what happens is the pad start method, once called, returns a string. All right. So now I'm going to be passing the length. I want everything to be just 5 in length. And then my fill character will just be a 0. And I'm going to put semicolon, which is not compulsory, but for convention. And, I just keep it that way. All right. So now I'm going to be doing a console .log, and in my console.log, what do I want to see? I want to see the new str. That's the value I want to see in my console. All right, that's the value I want to see in my console. All right, so okay, so this is what we have. So I'm going to go to my browser. First of all, I think I'm going to was running earlier, so I'm going to call my live server again. That pulls up my browser. So nothing special there. We're not really interested in all of that. What we're interested is in what's happening in the console. So let's see what's happening in the console. The console, there is the console. So we hit the console and voila, you see that 4 zeros have been added to the 7 string. And all in all, there are now 5 characters representing the length of 5. All right, which is what we have here. So if I wanted everything to be 3, and I run it one more time, go back to console, Control R to refresh. All right, let's see. It's coming. 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 Wow, it's taking all the time in the world. Aha. So you see, because I changed it, it's now 007 James Bond. All right. So basically, that's what the pad start does. So it allows you to pad. It's very useful for creating maybe unique kinds of strings. You know, you want to create certain custom strings. So pad start can help you. Now, as you may guess correctly, there is another method like the pad start, but what do you think will be the name? Pad end. Exactly. Pad end. So for pad end, it does the opposite of pad start. So it adds the string to the back of the existing string, not the front, to the back of the existing padding characters. These should be characters because there could be more than one. So this should be characters. All right. So let's see how that plays. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this code, bring it down here. Oops, my VS Code. Bring it down here. Yep. Yep. And I'm going to paste it here, but instead of this, I'm going to change these values to new, or I'm just going to add an N in front of it. And here I'm going to add a capital N so that we have different value, different variable names. And then instead of pad start, I'm going to do pad end. All right? Pad end. And let's see what happens when we go and refresh our console. Control R to refresh. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Do something, do something. Wait for it. 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 Aha. Voila. So now we have 007 for pad start and 700 for pad end. So basically, that's what that does. All right. So this, what it's telling us, this is not an error because I have an extension that helps me to stick to the camel case JavaScript convention. So what it's saying here is this should have been a capital S, all right, to maintain the JavaScript notation. Actually, this should have been this pad end to this. All right, pad end to that, and if you come here and you refresh, the same thing. All right, excellent. Now let's move on to another type of method. All right, so let's go to W3 Schools to see the rest. Excellent. So we've done pad start, we've done pad end. Now we will move on to another method. Now it says the pad end method is a string method. To pad a number, convert the number first to a string. So remember that they are both string methods. So don't try to come and do 7 here and try to pad it. It's going to give you an issue because it's the pad end and pad start, they are string methods. So if you want to pad this way, you have to convert this string, and there's a way to convert this to a string. All right, so to convert this to a string, you can just easily come here and call the toString method first. It's a method, so don't forget that. So you convert that to string, and then it will do the work. But before that, let's see without the toString. Let's see what happens when we try to run it without, when we're trying to run the pad end on the number 7. Let's see what happens in our console. We'll refresh the console now. Wait for aha. Say uncut type error. End to string today.pad is not a function. All right. He's saying that because end string today is a number. So pad end is not a method of a number. It's not a number method. It's a string method. So for it to work, we need to first of all convert this number to a string, and that is why I had this toString method, which will convert a number to a string. And then when we do this and refresh one more time, wait for it, aha, then it gives us 700. Okay, so let's go back to WP Schools quickly. And let's move on. So it has browser compatibility. So there's another method called the repeat method. Returns a string with a number of copies of a string. All right. So if you want to repeat this string, all right, this is a text, this is a string stored in the variable text. So if you want to repeat this hello string twice, then you call the repeat method and pass the value 2. So it repeats it twice. If you pass 1 here, it's not going to repeat. It's going to keep it exactly the same way. If you want to duplicate it, you have to pass 2 and above. All right. So you can practice some of these methods more on your own. Then there's a replace method, which is very important. I need to do this. There's a replace method. So what does this replace method do? Let's look at it. So what does it do? The replace method basically helps you to replace a string with another string. All right? It helps you to replace a string with another string. All right? But we are going to look at that in the next video. So watch out. We're going to continue with these string methods in the next video. All right? Watch out.